Concept 9. Analyze the relationship between the independent and dependent variables using graphs and tables. Our first example, Pat earns $9 per hour working as a lifeguard. Step 1. Write an equation. So again, we're going to use the equal sign because it's asking for an equation. So write an equation to represent the relationship between the number of hours Pat works and the amount of money that she earns. So we first have to figure out what the independent and dependent variables are. Now it actually asks for that in question number 2. So if we have, what are our two variables here? We've got how much she earns, and we've got how much she works. So what depends on what here? The amount of money that she earns depends on the number of hours that she works. So the independent variable is hours worked, because she can work whatever she wants. And the dependent variable is the money earned, because how much money she gets paid all depends on how many hours she works. So money earned is dependent. So that's number 2. Now number 1 is we're writing the equation to determine the relationship between the two. So the dependent variable, remember that's always going to be on our y-axis. We just did that in concept 9. That's going to be money earned, let's call that M for money. And hours worked, let's call that H for hours. So how much money she gets paid is equivalent to $9 for every hour she works. So the money is 9 times H. Again, you can put it in parentheses if you want. You can put the dot, the star, the X, whatever. You can leave it like it is. But how much money she gets paid is equivalent to 9 times H. Now we need to complete the table to show how much money she earned during the work week. And the table has been started for you here for the week of November 11th through November 17th. It tells you how many hours that Pat worked each day. So we have to fill out the earnings. For each of these days, to figure out the earnings, we have to plug in the number of hours into H. So for Monday, she worked 8 hours. 9 times 8, 72. So she earned $72 on Monday. She worked 6 hours on Tuesday. 9 times 6 is 54. And just keep going through that through Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. 9 times 7, 63. There's another 8, so there's 72 again. Took a short day on Friday. Only made $36. And again, took a short day on Saturday. 9 times 5, $45. So we filled in our table. Now the last question, question 4, says describe the relationship between the number of hours worked and the earnings. Well, the easiest way to put this is as the number of hours Pat works increases, the amount of money she gets paid increases. So as H increases, M increases. That is the relationship between the two. You could also include there, if you wanted to be a little more detailed, as H increases by 1, M increases by 9. So for every hour she works, she gets paid an extra $9. Our first practice problem deals with the amount of points on a Dave & Buster's card, as shown on this table here. So as you can see, as the number of games increases by 1, the number of points is going down by 4. So let's continue that on the graph, on the table, going down by 4. So that would be 188, 184. Now we've increased here by 5. So down here, I've got to, so here I went up by 5, and so that means I've got to go down by 5, and every game that was played cost 4 points. So I've got to lose 5 times 4 is 20, so I'm going to go down by 20 points there. So it went from 184 to 164. What about on this next one? I went from 10 to 20, so I went up by 10. So that means here I'm going down by 10, and again, each game I play costs 4 points. So I'm going down by 4 times 10, going down by 40, so that leaves me with 124 points on my card once I've played 20 games. And the last piece, going from 20 to 50, so I've increased here by 30 points, or by 30 games, excuse me. Now, so I've got to subtract 30 games, and each game leaves me here. 4 times 30 is 120, so I lose 120 points there, which gives me just 4 points left. So if you went one more game out, you would play 51 games and you would lose your last 4 points. So you can play 51 games with this card and not have to refill, and you can use all 51 games. All 200 points are used up. Now, as a bonus, the question doesn't actually ask you to do this, but I want you to pause the video now, see if you can figure out what the equation would be, what your two variables are, independent and dependent, and what the equation would be for this table. Pause that video now, see if you can figure that out. Did you get the independent variable equal to the number of games played, and the dependent variable the points on the card, because the points on the card depend on the number of games you played? If so, then you're on the right track. Let's call the independent variable G for the number of games played. Yes, that's how I write my capital G's. Don't judge me. And let's call P the points on the card. Now, to write the equation, we know we've got our points on the card, but there's a little bit of a trick here. So this doesn't actually start at 0 for the number of games played. It starts at 1. So if you played a game already, you have 200 points. If you played one game, you have 200 points still left on your card. And we know that every time you play a game, it's going down by 4. So we could continue this table over here, and if we had played 0 games, you would have 204 points on your card. So when you buy the game, or when you buy the card, it gives you 204 points. So the points start at 204, and every time I play a game, I use 4 points. So I use 4 points per game I play. Again, you don't have to have the parentheses in there, but you can choose to if you'd like. So my equation is P equals 204 minus 4G. And that's why if I plug in 51 for G, I would get 204 minus 4 times 51 is also 204, 0. So if I played 51 games at Dave & Buster's with this card, I would have 0 points left. The next question asks you to create a graph from this data. I've imported the graph here. I'll write my splat out on the side so I don't forget that. Remember, that was concept 3. And I need to title it. You can, again, of course, always title it the same way your science teacher would have you do it, the number of games played versus the points on the card. I'm going to title it Dave & Buster's Point Card because I'm feeling creative this evening. Dave & Buster's Point Card. And I'd better capitalize all of this so my language arts teacher is happy, since this is the title. And then I need to put the independent and dependent variables on there. There's my title. Independent variable, we said, is the number of games played. That goes on the x-axis. So number of games played on the x-axis, right there, and points on the card go on the y-axis. Points on the card. And there we go. So I've got my title. I've labeled. Better do my axes. So there's, let's go green here for this so we can make it a little bit easier to see. There's my X, there's my Y, and there's my origin at 0, 0. Now I just need a scale, and I need to plot it. So looking at the independent, the number of games played goes from 1 all the way up to 50. Well, I've got just a handful of points here, so I should probably go by 5s. So I'll pause the video and label those. Come back when you've done the same. And similarly, I don't have a whole lot of points on my y-axis, and I've got to go all the way up to 200. So I'm going to pause the video and go by 20s here. Now this is going to be extremely difficult because my graph is so small. You should be able to have a little bit of an easier time on here. But when I go to graph this, I just now have to, well, I've got my scale done so I can cross that off. But I've got a graph at 1 game, which is going to be really short here. I've got 200 points. So that's right in there. This is really tough to do with a stylus. At 2 games, I've got 196 points. At 3 games, I've got 192. Now I'm already past where I should be. So I'm going to zoom it out a little bit, erase those points there, and I'm going to go for the easier ones that I can get to. Like at 5 right here on the line, I'm at 184 points. So that'll be right around there. Again, really difficult with a stylus. At 10, I'm at 164. Right in there, a little bit lower, probably closer. That's about 170. At 20, I'm at 124. So skip over to where 20 is. And I'm at 124 there. That one's actually pretty close. And at 50, I'm at 4. My first one was at 200 there. So this is a straight line, so I can connect this line perfectly straight like that. And you can have all of the extra ones in there. You should be able to connect it with a straight line, with a ruler, and be able to put all the points in there. So in this case, you're doing as I say, not as you see on the screen. But you should have a graph that has that same type of look to it. From here, we should be able to look at questions 3 and 4 and answer both of those pretty much simultaneously. How does the pattern of change show up in the table? Well, as the number of games played increases, the number of points on the card decreases, or again, if you wanted to be specific, as the number of games played increases by 1, the points on the card decreases by 4. How does the pattern of change show up in the graph? What do you notice on the points on the graph? Well, you notice the same thing because it's the same data. As the number of games played increases, the number of points on the card decreases. So the games increase, the points decrease. Points go down as the games go up. You can also say the same thing here if you want to be specific for question 4. How does the pattern of change show up in the graph? As the number of games played increases by 1, the points on the card decrease by 4. So you get the exact same thing there. Alright, now you're on to the practice quiz 10, where again you've been given a table and you're going to finish filling in the table, you're going to make a coordinate graph, and then you're going to describe the relationship. However, with the practice quiz graph and table, there is no equation to make for this quiz. Okay, so in this one we made our equation and we had the 204 minus 4p equals g. You're not going to have that when you do your practice quiz. Alright, I've plotted this so I can finish off my splat, and I am done. Good luck with the practice quiz.